Technology has become a powerful, ubiquitous, and incredibly versatile ally in both everyday life and in creation. Over the last decade, we've seen a new breed of artists and designers make tremendous strides in exploring its creative potential. This advent of new possibilities and new processes has led to a wave of astounding, previously unimaginable work where technology is tool, medium, and collaborator.
The sheer abundance of new installations, visualizations, performances, and experiences that come out of festivals, institutions, and studios is intoxicating, and it indicates a growing global enthusiasm.
It is important to remember that each of these projects is underpinned by a fascinating practice, maybe a theoretical position, biographical details, and a backstory. And these stories of perseverance, ingenuity, and collaboration, they tell us a lot. It's not only about media and craft, but human nature as well. So there's this entire world of tangential narratives that just simply do not show up in reviews and blog posts and tweets where this work is discussed. And essentially, these stories just fall between the cracks.
We love the immediacy of blogs and social media, but while speed is great for skimming and sharing, it's an unsatisfying, exhausting environment for telling extensive, more involved stories. The ideas that drive practices are not fast. Neither are the broader shifts in discourse, methods, or aesthetics. That's why we felt the need to augment the web spin cycle with a slower and more methodical approach. 18 months ago, we started working on something that we called Unidentified Publishing Object, a magazine that we now call HOLO.
HOLO is about people interrogating technology, and it focuses on the things that we're missing on the web, the faces, the personalities, the anecdotes behind important work. To uncover those details and knit them into compelling stories, you have to get face-to-face with people. You have to meet them in the work environment, spend time with them, and really observe their practice and their daily routines. Together with an international team of writers and photographers, that's exactly what we did.
For the launch issue of HOLO, we traveled to New York and Berlin, London, Brighton, Toronto and Montreal, as well as towns in Sweden and Switzerland, to meet with key artists in their studios, galleries, and laboratories. And we were provided with this privileged, intimate access that yielded extraordinary material, and only a premium magazine could do it justice.
We want people to keep HOLO. We want it to live on bookshelves next to monographs. There'll be 2 issues per year, with 150 to 200 pages in each, printed on high-quality paper stock. It'll be more like a book than a magazine. The pace, depth, and sensibility of HOLO speaks to a broader audience as well. People who don't necessarily follow the blogosphere or Twitter updates on a daily basis, but who would appreciate a comprehensive and carefully curated overview of what's happening now in the world of art and technology.
We want HOLO to offer insiders a compelling view into their world and a friendly entry point for everybody else. You could say that HOLO is compatible with coffee tables of architects and software artists alike. It's an accessible guide and an indispensable reference.
Making a print magazine in 2012 is admittedly a bit of a romantic affair. We love the presence, the straightforwardness, and the formal elegance of the medium and think that it is as relevant as ever, because the more we extend our lives into the web, the more important the tactile objects that we choose to surround ourselves with become. We hope that HOLO will be one of them. And with your help, the first issue will be out in early 2013 and on the shelves of selected book and magazine shops around the world.
So hello everyone, my name's Greg Smith. I'm really excited to be, I guess here isn't the correct word, but to be present in some sense with you guys today and to be talking about my work. Jesse's a good peer and I've enjoyed speaking for his classes in the past.
And just I want to thank Greg. I haven't introduced him. He's introduced himself by way of his video. I'll stand so he can see me again. I want to thank Greg for coming today from Canada. Greg and I have known each other for quite a number of years. We were students together in architecture at the University of Toronto. Neither of us is particularly involved in architecture anymore, which is interesting and something we can talk about later. And Greg has been involved in kind of pioneering efforts to write about and discuss emerging technology and its intersections with art, science, and design for 10 years now. And actually, Greg started his education in design in LA at a school called the LA Institute for Art and Design in the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at there, and Greg, take it away again.
Yep. Thanks for the introduction. Between that and the Kickstarter video, it saves me a little time. So yeah, I'm going to talk about a few projects today, and kind of the overall way I frame this talk and maybe my practice now. It's taken me a while to figure this out. It's probably media making. So I looked at kind of the speaker list of individuals you guys have kind of whirling through your class over the course of the semester, and many of them are kind of capital A artists or capital D designers. In some sense, I consider myself a designer, but now I guess I'm kind of starting to hug this idea of just being a media maker. And over the course of this talk, I'll kind of unpack that. My talk title is Disconnecting from the Spin Cycle and Other Tales, and that will kind of make sense as we move on a little bit. As you mentioned, I expected to only be voice. I do have a head. No need for this. Here's me at a festival in Serbia, actually, a few weeks ago. Probably the only decent photo of me in the world right now. So the projects that I'm going to talk about today are twofold, and I invite you to, if you're the type that likes to kind of browse and stuff on the web while you listen to lectures, that's definitely encouraged in this session because we're talking about media, and one of the two media channels that I'm going to talk about today is a website called creativeapplications.net, which is a fairly prominent, not the biggest fish, not the smallest fish, somewhere in the middle. I don't really want to call it a digital art blog, but it's a blog essentially about very much the convergence of art, design, technology, without particular concern for, should it go in a gallery or not? Is that person an artist or not? Just people making cool shit, from the Wet Cube Gallery to like neat apps, installations, tutorials, whatever, just kind of all over the map. And it's not so much that we're doing this website that's been active for a few years, but it's the fact that a community is mobilized around it, and that's kind of turned into opportunities to kind of engage and make things and hold events. So that's one of the kind of streams of this talk. And then the other is, I'll speak to the image on the right, which is HOLO Magazine you guys just saw, the Kickstarter video. This project that I've been working on, although we literally just shipped the first issue of the magazine about a week and a half ago, this is actually something I've been working on since 2010. So much of the talk is very much going to kind of delve into the backstory behind this. I know you guys probably haven't figured out your exact trajectory in life or even probably your program, but anybody that's kind of making stuff, I hope, would find some value in kind of my war stories, what I've spent doing for the last few years, and hopefully if it's of interest to you as well. But I do encourage you to check out creativeapplications.net, maybe after this talk or whatever, because it's kind of vital to kind of the conversation. So this is actually an image, speaking of architecture school, which Jesse mentioned. This is a drawing or maybe a diagram that I did when I was in architecture school. I should have known I was doomed to never be an architect in the conventional sense because I did my thesis project about the death of the newspaper industry. So that's not ironic now that I'm launching a print magazine in 2014. So there's definitely some threads that run through my practice over the last decade. This was me attempting, as an outsider, as a designer, in fact, not even as a manager or anything, but that to unpack the production cycle in and around editorial design for newspapers, and not only think through what you see on the left is the content mill and the people in the kind of chain of command, but then on the right we also see production, business, and advertising. And the way at the bottom, all these kind of areas where dotted lines are coming in, this is like other new media at the time. This was 2006, but things like Craigslist undermining, newspaper advertising revenue from classifieds. And, we talk lots about newspapers being dead. Well, have you visited the New York Times lately? It's obviously not dead. It's doing quite well. But the industry and print culture and digital kind of media has obviously transformed tremendously, in the last 5 years. And it'll transform just as much by the time you guys are done your program. So these are exciting times. So I'm just kind of showing this to kind of show this is stuff I've been thinking about for some time. And just as kind of a mascot for this talk, a really stellar project, listening post by Mark Hansen and Ben Rubin, quite some time older than my thesis work and quite more recognized. This is kind of one of the most famous kind of new media installations, let's just say, of the century so far. It's a classic. It's a great project. I highly recommend checking out the video. And I'm going to share a PDF of this talk after the fact with Jesse. There's kind of links all through it. So if you guys are interested in bits of the stuff I talk about, I encourage you to check out the PDF and follow up on some of these projects. But this project essentially was this huge array of little teletext type screens. I just have a little blurb here. This is just from the artist statement. Listening Post is an art installation by Mark Hansen and Ben Rubin that culls text fragments in real time from thousands of unrestricted internet chat rooms. So it's kind of like trawling the web for text fragments. And it takes this stuff from bulletin boards and other public forums. The texts are read or sung by voice synthesizer and simultaneously displayed across a suspended grid of more than 200 small electronic screens. So this array of information flowing that's just being pulled from the web, and then the idea is that you stand in front of this thing and kind of bask in the ephemerality of the digital, and these little fleeting bits of conversations that maybe kind of a concrete poetry happens from weird adjacencies, and somebody's talking about conflict in the Middle East and somebody's talking about, I don't know, taking a selfie or something. So this is an old piece, and I point to it now because it was obviously very kind of ahead of its time and kind of anticipating the direction this decade would take for kind of making and experiencing media. Lev Manovich, who's a great media theorist, if you aren't familiar with his work, he's worth looking up. He kind of commented that this was the first new media work that really anticipated Facebook and Twitter feeds by about 5 years. Which, of course, this is a space we all hang out now. We all watch like our friends' lives kind of scroll by on Facebook and Twitter from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. But at the time, that was unheard of, other than maybe if you were looking at like a, old telegraph machine or some such, or, a text SMS type messages. So I think this is kind of a great kind of mascot for how we communicate and convey information has changed in the last decade. So I really invite you to check out this project. And yeah, like I said, it seems like such an obvious idea now. You'd probably see a project like this being done in an art school now, but like, it totally anticipates this phase, right? Just watching things kind of roll by, that we all do. We're all kind of pilots. We're all kind of jockeying these channels that we build out of the people and things that we're interested in. And this is kind of my setup for talking about print and the web in 2014. And then there's lots of other changes afoot related to how we kind of, are perceiving and acting in the world today. This is an image of high-frequency trading algorithms. I don't know if any of you are familiar, but a few years ago there was a flash crash where automated, basically like algorithmic robots brought down the stock market because there was kind of like some cascading failures, and it actually affected like the NASDAQ and the Dow Jones index. So I like this. These are kind of neat as a mascot for like all these automated systems that we're starting to occupy or kind of have work alongside us in media space. There's lots of stats out there that talk about like Twitter being 30% bots, and there's lots of kind of other examples of like how we've kind of permeated our communication systems and our representation systems with kind of like infinitesimal, quantifiable kind of systems. There's lots of other examples. Your smartphone isn't just a phone anymore; it's a bundle of sensors. We have domestic robots, right? This is strange and new. There's looming surveillance concerns in the States and Canada. We're certainly not free of that. Nothing seems to be private anymore. So my point in kind of pointing at all this abstract stuff is that we live in very strange times. So it only follows that the way that we consume and make and perceive media is also changing just as quickly. And of course, art is a mirror of life, right? So the way that artists kind of, produce work, share work, and exist, this is kind of, these types of, scenarios are also showing up in the way that artists work, in the way that they kind of distribute and disseminate and promote their work. So I could point at 1,000 examples. One that immediately came to mind when I was looking at that, the trading algorithm was like Petra Kortrite, who's actually a Santa Barbara-based web artist, does a lot of video. She basically kind of distributes a chunk of her work through YouTube, in the same way that somebody might distribute just a humble video blog or, video game tutorials. And she actually, she's an artist that's selling in galleries. She actually determines the price of her videos based off the number of YouTube views. She has an equation figured out. So this is, a kind of a snarky and snide recognition of ideas of audience and authorship, and then, of course, the market as well. There's lots of other examples. Raphael Rosendahl is an artist who sells websites. So he makes like the equivalent of paintings. They're these beautiful WebGL type pieces that, work nicely in a modern browser like Chrome, and then somebody can buy it and he sells them the deed. So, here's this neat intersection of like, in the same way that an artist would sell a painting in 1910, you have an artist now working with, HTML5 and code and selling a website. The idea of a web browser is a window. So, everything's new, but also it's kind of also just the same as it was before. So again, we live in strange times. So just some overarching questions. I'm going to try to do this to come back to kind of sets of concerns as I kind of talk through this. Things that I've been thinking about, things that I'm kind of thinking about in this talk today. How are the translation of everyday interactions into machine-readable data changing our communication and perception? So things like Twitter, once upon a time, I might telegraph somebody if like a baby is born or somebody died on the other side of the country 100 years ago. Now I'd tweet what I had for lunch and share a picture of it on Instagram, right? So what is that access and unlimited bandwidth and unlimited connectivity mean to the way that we communicate? At what point do speed and ubiquitous connectivity stop being assets and begin to become liabilities? I love media, the internet's great, but also Twitter gives me a headache. There's lots of people that I just don't want to hear them think at all, and I don't know why I subject myself to it. There's lots. We all kind of have these conversations. We all are kind of living in public, but also trying to be private. So it's this tension we all kind of thrive within. And then, this is the broader question. This is what somebody that makes a magazine in 2014 says: what kind of mediated experiences are good for the soul? That's my warm and fuzzy question. And hopefully, at least as far as I'm concerned, this magazine I'm going to talk about, it's good for my soul, and I hope it's good for the soul of some of our readers. So to get started, and you would have seen this in the Kickstarter video, Creative Applications Network is kind of home base for me and my collaborators. It's a web blog that we launched in 2008, and I guess I'll resist the urge to scroll around it at the second and just kind of show you some moments from it and kind of talk about how it works.
We'll put it on our website.
Yeah, sure. You can look it up now. I feel like I'm tightrope walking with the screen share, so I don't want to mess with it if it's working. Skype always gives me grief. So essentially, I do fine art writing. I do catalog essays for artists. I do, magazine feature type essays and stuff. But the way that art is generally written about on the internet mostly is not that, which is interesting, right? I talked about taking a picture of your lunch. Well, the internet has kind of changed the way that we write about art. So Creative Applications Network, CAN, I'll just refer to it as that for short, is kind of one of a crop of newer publications that kind of very informally deals with art and design and technology. And kind of the base unit of content on CAN is a project. And my collaborator, Filip Viznic, who's UK-based but Serbian, he's kind of the engine behind this blog and has been for about 5, I guess this is the 6 years now. We launched it in 2008. And essentially what he does as kind of a tastemaker is notes noteworthy work and shares it. And with very minimal commentary, very minimal opinion, he's like, here's a thing, this is kind of how it works, and our audience kind of makes stuff so they're more open to technical or kind of details than maybe a more general audience would be. But essentially it's just like, here's something you should look at, check it out, buy. And it's that 15 times a week. Obviously most of the internet works like this now. But when CAN popped up, there wasn't that much art writing like that. It was very much kind of more traditional like essays or opinion type pieces. So this is an example of a square pusher video made by Daito Manabe, this Japanese virtuoso media artist. And it's just literally a picture, some technical details, links, go check it out yourself, and the video. And that's become kind of the atomic unit of CAN. And essentially, it's just the blog is a stream of projects. And the credibility, we have a good audience that trusts us, and we think we're better than similar blogs because we're more discerning. So this brand has been built around, like, we pick cool shit, and that's kind of it. And it sounds mundane, but just sticking with it, you build a large audience over time as a tastemaker, which is a crass way of describing it. So CAN isn't just projects. If we look at like the landing page, we can just kind of see recent stuff. But also, it's also a home for very, very long form, very, very detailed tutorials and reference type documents. Things that like would be maybe book chapters or larger that, if you were in print, you probably wouldn't publish them unless they were a dedicated publication. But because the web, a post is never too big. A thing is never too big. You're not paying for space. You don't have a word count. So this is an example of a really thorough, supposedly the best that exists that's publicly shared, a guide to using projectors in video art related installations written by an artist named Blair Neal. And supposedly, like, there's just not a thing like this out there. And, you know, we'll see books on this that will get outdated quickly in a few years from publishers like O'Reilly and stuff. But Cannes is also home for stuff like this that's kind of timely, and, you know, the community around Cannes, because they're making art, this would be a value to them. So there's this weird kind of contrast between, like, sprawling reference and ephemeral, you know, projects that you should check out. There's some other examples of really detailed stuff. You know, we've had kind of long theoretical essays on things like gaming. Karsten Schmidt, who's one of kind of the leading creative coders, really worth checking out, did this 13,000 word tutorial to Clojure, which is like a Lisp, a programming language that he's kind of obsessed with and evangelizing. There'd just be no other place for that. And it was kind of too short for a book, but way too big for most people's attention span. But Cannes is kind of the place where there would be home for that, and the audience that would want to find that would see that. So we built a reputation around kind of knowing what's up and, you know, consistently, like, find out about cool projects from us. So just some stats, and I used to think it was crass when organizations do this, but they give a bit of a sense of scale and whatever. It can get to about 500,000 page views a month. 150,000 of those are unique, so basically it means people are coming back about 3 times. 20,000 RSS subscribers, which is diminishing because people don't use RSS anymore because they just read their news on Facebook and Twitter. 35,000 Twitter followers, 46,000 Facebook likes, which is just to say we have an audience that's global and that's enthusiastic and excited. So we're really lucky, although it didn't happen by accident. It mostly happened through perseverance and learning from what people wanted, you know, seeing what people were into. And one of the nicer things that anybody said about us is Wired Magazine. They were doing kind of an essential 2013, these are your future curator people roundup, and they pointed at creative apps and kind of, which is hilarious because their UK blog is always pilfering content from ours, but they described us as a platform of record for people who are comfortable talking about artificial intelligence and aesthetics. The future of art and design arrives just a little bit earlier on their feeds. Wired Magazine, which is great. And it's almost like we're going to go back and talk about those trading algorithms now. Like, our reputation is literally staked on being 2 days faster than all the other similar blogs, which sounds ridiculous. But if you're paying attention to this stuff day in and day out, that's a credibility, because it means we know. I'm really talking about Philip, so I'm not inflating myself. I'm really speaking to his kind of expertise. We know what is significant when it emerges because we're not writers who happen to be writing about this. We're kind of operating within this community. And so there's this nice back and forth. The community trusts us, and you know, we kind of survey and look for the most interesting work. So when you have an audience like this, you can start to do stuff, right? Anytime you're working on a project, it's the same with an art practice. You know, you hit a certain threshold and you're like, oh wow, you know, I have an opening and 300 people come out, or I want to stage an event, you know, people will come. So Cannes has kind of, in recent years, kind of been exploring this and kind of, in terms of branching out with the blog, a really logical direction for us was to start doing events. So this isn't so much my deal, but it's kind of vitally related to Cannes. This is Philip's project called Resonate, which is a new media festival in Belgrade, in Serbia. It happens every spring, and it's an easy excuse to invite the readership, mostly EU, but worldwide, people do come from all over the world, to come to a city and, like, learn together. So there's a bunch of workshops like you see in the left, and, like, these are, like, really new workshops. It's people trying really strange stuff that, you know, just maybe wouldn't be commercially viable elsewhere. But like the blog, you're getting this critical threshold of people who kind of, we think, know what's going on or have kind of, you know, they're really on the edge, so they can come together and kind of brainstorm together. And then, of course, you know, standard kind of festival type stuff like talks and artist talks, presentations, panels, you know, parties, whatever. So this has been one direction that the blog has kind of extended, is going from, you know, this communal water cooler for people making media art, or maybe just like looking at it and not even making it, but just like, I like to look at cool stuff. And then coming together to actually try to drive discourse forward you know, just find out what each other are up to. And the magazine is very much, you know, an extension out of the blog as well. So I'll move forward a little bit. Now, sorry, I just needed some coffee. It was parched already. You know, I was talking about the web and, you know, things like Instagram and, you know, the fact that people tweet what they have for lunch, whatever. You know, it's great to be putting material online. It's exciting. It's neat. You know, we're doing it, but lots of other publications are doing it as well. And a year or two ago, we started to get really frustrated. And I'm sure you guys, in your own way, in your own media consumption, you see this as well. It was hard, or it was frustrating in that we felt, you know, I was talking about how we produced content so quickly compared to other people, but it was weird because there was lots of other people suddenly producing content in the same way as us and featuring the same projects as us. And you'd start to see this. So we post something, and it, you know, it goes both ways. It wouldn't just be that they're seeing stuff on our site and we're seeing stuff on theirs. You know, the Creators Project might post it the next day, and then Fast Company a few days later. And it's literally the same template for discussing work and maybe cutting and pasting some pieces from the artist statement, but also having some minimal commentary. But once you start seeing the exact same editorial formula applied across different publications, it kind of is demoralizing because you just feel like you're one of many. So yeah, sure, we had this festival and stuff, but online we were kind of dragging our tails between our legs because it just felt like we were in a horse race with these other publications to cover the exact same projects. When we started, very few people were covering this world, and now there's very big technology blogs with dedicated design channels essentially writing about many of the same projects as us. So we kind of started to do a little soul searching, and we're like, well, what are we really trying to do here? Because I mean, it's depressing, you know, what you kind of see with this image is it's like just like a shell game. It's literally people like rearranging the photos and, you know, having marginally different commentary. But, you know, everybody wants to think they're a unique and beautiful snowflake, of course, right? And it's like the same thing, you know, if you're in art school and you do a project and then you realize that somebody's already done it before. So we wanted to kind of really start to think about what was next for CAN as a publishing platform and where we could go. So this is the spin cycle that I'm talking about. This like, okay, everybody's producing lots of stuff on the web, so are we. How do we be unique, right? This is what I'm talking about. This whole talk is kind of escaping that and making something we really want to make and stepping away from the anxiety of, I don't know, fear of missing out and kind of the churn of the web is something we refer to it. So kind of our questions for moving forward with CAN, you know, a year or two ago, before the magazine started. If the web engenders a particular kind of discourse about new media and creative endeavors, how do other mediums inflect conversations about art and technology? You know, if we were doing documentary movies about these projects and artists, how would they be different? Magazines, obviously, is the route we chose. This is something we kind of considered. This is pragmatic and probably boring to you guys, but it's important if you're trying to make your passion project a job. If advertising revenue is hard to come by online, it's very hard. You need so much traffic to make nothing. How do we make our publishing project sustainable, right? Because if you're putting stuff on the web, you're giving it away for free. And we make enough money off advertising to like pay for the desk where Philip sits and writes all day. Nothing more with the blog. So it's this horrible trap. And a lot of the people, the websites like Creators Project or Fast Company we're competing with were big companies with staff. So it was really frustrating for us to find ourselves, I won't say competing against, but covering the same beat with very few resources and very few people as like Vice Media or whoever. So we were like, okay, it's not that we want to drive nice cars. It's that we want to like pay our rent and work on this 3 days a week or something like that. And we still haven't got there, but maybe the magazine is taking us down that path. And then finally, most importantly, what's next for the blog? You know, 5 years into a project, again, you do a little soul searching. What are we trying to do here? What's the end game? So these were the things we were thinking about leading up to the magazine. And I'm actually right on schedule with this talk, which is terrifying because that never happens. We'll see if that continues. So some kind of other changes were afoot. I talked about things like trading algorithms before. I don't know, has anybody seen this image before? Probably not. Jesse? This is a little printer. Probably, I might have shown it in Jesse's one of his other classes. I don't know. This is a neat little Internet of Things object by a studio called Berg. They used to be a design studio. They did a lot of amazing work. They actually closed up to become service providers for this cloud internet language they're working on. But this was kind of their proof of concept object, and it was called Little Printer. And what it was this little like internet connected thermal printer, obviously anthropomorphized and friendly, and you could subscribe to things with it. So you could get like a recipe, you could get like soup recipe of the week. And every week, like on Monday, a little recipe would print out. Or, you know, you could make your own newspaper to share with your friends. So it sounds absurd, but it's this kind of like craft or artisanal version of, you know, media making that I was talking about earlier. And it's just a fun project. And it would, I think, you know, if it was just a dumpy laser printer in a corner, I mean, there might be one in your room right there, or, you know, you've got computer labs, like nobody pays any attention to it because it's cute, this cute little object. and there's an API, which is an application programming language, which means you can build your own apps for it. People really, really engaged around this and were excited by it. And I like it. I think it kind of speaks to, and the fact that it outputs these little receipts, I think it speaks to some other changes in the last few years, which is kind of a shift back to tangible media. Vinyl is always being resurrected. That's a great example. There's lots of examples of products out there that kind of are taking advantage of the love of material culture. Things like Meshu, which is like this 3D printing service where you can print a little piece of jewelry based off your Foursquare activity. And yeah, I could point to many other things. Magazines are very much kind of something in the space. It's something that's in the world, and essentially it's like, oh, it's luxurious because it's not digital and ephemeral. So, all this connectivity I was talking about earlier that we all, are awash in, that kind of engenders this like a fascination with just beautiful things that are in the world. So this was kind of for us, it was like, hey, wait a second, maybe print is like really viable again. So the question we decided we were going to ask to move forward, and this was the Kickstarter pitch, what if Can was a magazine? And then to just kind of bring things back to the digital arts, because it might seem weird that to cover digital in print versus digital, but print and digital are very intertwined, and they always have been. This is there's lots of digital artists from the 60s doing things with like plotter drawings, which were like the predecessors of laser printers. Manfred Moore, one of the original digital artists. This is a drawing that he did, a computer drawing that was output with a printer. He's really worth looking up if you're not familiar with his work. And then, of course, there's this intrinsic connection between print and digital art, whether it's software books, artist monographs, festival brochures. There's these beautiful artifacts that are completely capable and completely comfortable and immaculate that do a great job of celebrating, specific shows, specific artists, specific moments. So, for us, looking at this, thinking about the web, looking at this, we're like, we want to do this too. Okay, we've got this blog that, people could read the same projects we cover elsewhere. So how can we take and make content and make this beautiful thing that people want to own and hold and crassly pay for as well? I'm not going to touch on this too much, but despite kind of the endless talk that print is dead, magazines, some of them are doing quite well. Many have died in the last few years. Just briefly, kind of Holo's pitch. This isn't in the video, but we always talked about it being halfway between Freeze and Wired. So essentially accessible but arty. There's been tons and tons of great indie publications that have totally emerged and thrived in the last 5 years. This same kind of period that social media has totally taken over. And the reason for that is boutique and niche publishers with very specific interests. Example like fixed gear bikes, or making beer with your own equipment, or art and science enthusiasts. These small publications can find their audience online. And it's really that simple. So suddenly there's this whole new wave of small press indie magazines with a circulation of 4,000, which is totally tiny. Insert an interest field or a niche interest, and there's a magazine for it right now, and they're all doing okay. So again, looking at these, we thought to ourselves, us too, we want to do this. And I don't want to make it out like we didn't know anything about media making before we got started after Can. There was also a magazine called Scene that predated Holo. In some ways, Holo is Scene 3. I won't really speak to that too much. And I also was involved with this web-based journal called Vague Terrain before Can. So these are kind of the ancestors to Holo, which I don't really have much time to talk about. So we packed up our ideas. I'll talk. Essentially, you saw the general pitch in the Kickstarter video. That didn't change, but what the Kickstarter video doesn't talk about is we tried to actually get it published by a real publisher a year before that video went live. And we got many of these, which are rejection letters. We contacted like all of our favorite publishers, people that made some of these books, actually. Gestalt and Frame Publishers, Princeton Architectural Press, and they all sent us nice rejection letters. So, essentially we were like, but we've got this great idea. There's an audience waiting. Nobody else is doing it. All we need is a little bit of money. We'll do all the work. Help us out. Didn't happen. Nobody wanted a piece of it. So the Kickstarter video, which is where you guys started today, is kind of where the first part of his talk wraps up. The backstory is that before going to Kickstarter, we got rejected by all these publishers, but then we were able to speak directly to our audience. And, we found out that, oh, yes, people do want this. It's just that the margins are too small for some business conglomerate or art publisher to kind of worry about. So you saw the Kickstarter video. We did okay. We got some money. We got more than we asked for, but ironically not enough because we didn't really know what we were doing, because that's what Kickstarter is. It's a machine for giving people money when they don't really know what they're doing, for better and worse. So these were kind of the questions we asked ourselves when our campaign finished about 14 months ago. How do we transition from this shiny idea into a lean and mean editorial production team, sustainable business? Is our budget realistic? How do we decide on our production partners? Are we going to do ads? How's that going to work? Can we have ads that don't suck? And because we didn't know what we were doing. And what we wanted to do was go from this, right? This was the comfortable space. Anybody can pitch an idea to, the magazine being printed, to in production, to that. And this, this is 4 images, and this is also 14 months of work and figuring stuff out. The first issue of HOLO was just shipped. So good, I'm still on schedule. So I want to talk a little bit about story making, just a bit more. What we did with HOLO, really in a nutshell, and the video kind of speaks to what we wanted to do, which is take time to pay attention to artists and creatives, and document how they think, not just put pictures of their work in the video online and go, ooh, shiny, look, go click. And that, we had to figure out how this works. We worked with many people in the magazine industry, but we mostly produced content for web, so this took some learning for us. So there's another transition. In the same way we had to go from shiny idea to magazine, we also had to, figure out collecting media, and then also reconcile with kind of making it a finished editorial. So I'm just going to run through one piece really quickly, just to kind of talk about some of the things we did. So this is a feature I did, and unfortunately I have pictures all through the presentation, but these are just PDF captures. This is one of our features on Jer Thorpe. And just to get a sense, this is what like a HOLO story looks like. So lots of photography in the studio, big wide column, kind of book-like and text, full bleed photography. Nobody in the web would pay, $600 to send a photographer to an artist studio to shoot them, working while their dog sits. So we wanted to not only provide insight through editorial about the way that people work, but also just show where they work and like where they hang out in their neighborhoods. So it's just kind of shots of Jer, and then some of his work at the end. And for this piece, and for all of our pieces, we spent tons of time with our artists. And again, this is something you would not see on the web, because there's just, basically you want to turn stuff around and get it out fast. So because we're working in this now 6-month publishing cycle, we can actually take, 2.5 months to work on a story. I mean, some of our stories were a year plus in development for a first issue. We can't do that again. So we'd go visit artists in their workspace. We'd go watch them teach. We'd go out for drinks with them. We'd go see their opening. We'd catch up with them a bunch. And we got to kind of experience time and kind of explore it in this in-depth way in these stories. And essentially that's what makes us different than all this stuff on the web that's similar. We're covering the same stuff in a very different way. And we're actually showing these artists as people, not as these genius creators that, come down from the heavens with their next great work and then disappear to their workshop again, only to return a year later. So essentially humanizing people. There's this great Katie Krause quote. She's this magazine kind of evangelist in Germany. And she says that, there's so many magazines that are basically the editorial proposition is people doing interesting stuff in the field of X. And that's what we are. We're looking at people that are using technology creatively, but we're showing them as humans, and providing access to them in a way that, hasn't really been done before. So that's just a story. We have 10 main features in the piece, but I just wanted to kind of provide a window into one of them. We started thinking, how can we leverage all the tricks and capabilities of the medium to tell better stories? Coming from this web space, we have videos, we have images, we have slideshows, we can quote things. Print obviously has its own toolkit. We had to learn it fast and learn what it'll mean on our publication. How do we show subjects and document their work? The spread or the feature I just showed you was about 16 pages. That seems like a lot, but it's not. When you only have 6 photographs and maybe can show 4 projects, how do you choose the right ones? How much you want to put on a page, etc. And how do we take full advantage of our extended production time to inform our stories? I kind of spoke to that already. I can't believe I'm actually on time. Okay, so this is the magazine just came out. We debuted some copies of it at this festival in Belgrade a few weeks ago. It shipped. It's been shipping for a week and change, but really it only started shipping about 9 days ago. This is my only experience with it. I haven't really talked about it since it was done. This is watching Michelle Champagne, who's this kind of rising star editorial designer, and Cedric from this design group called Normals just look at the magazine. And all my enjoyment has come from just watching people explore it for the first time. So I'm just going to talk through a couple design and production related details, and hopefully some of that resonates with what I was talking about, the things we learned, the observations we made with CAN on the web. So HOLO's, we really take advantage of print to make a perfect publication. So the magazine is perfect bound, which basically means it opens like this, so there's no kind of cruddy spine that will diminish over time. So it's built to last, which essentially means it's something that's archival, right? So we talk about like permanence. Well, we stick to our guns in terms of our design details as well. And then I showed you the feature with Thorpe, which was, just kind of text and images of his face. There's not really any work here, except at the end there's a quick recap of some projects. So we had a hard problem trying to figure out where to put the artist work. So essentially we do these runs in the magazine of full color spreads, 2-page spreads of work, just to kind of browse like a monograph. So, here we're very much a magazine, and here we're very much an art monograph. No information even, it's just a visual thing. So you get these runs of pages. These aren't exactly in a row, but there'd be 6 or 7 in a row. And you could just kind of like sift through the work, and then if you're interested, there's details about which artist it is, so go check them out on this page. So again, this is kind of using the medium to its capacity and also kind of staying true to the way that we're kind of organizing our stories. And I'll try to quit with a seizure-inducing flicking in a second. And then each piece ends with some kind of key projects. And the assumption is, well, you can just look that stuff up on the web anyways, so we don't need to say that much about it. So here's the projects, here's the details. Maybe, this is a festival that premiered at. You go look it up on the web. So we're being comfortable with the fact that the artists have their portfolios online and we can't show everything. We have limited space. We're not a full monograph. We're kind of a taste test of a monograph. So again, we're trying to use all our faculties to think about what would be most useful to our readers and what would most archive these practices. And then, so you saw our people features. There's 10 of those. The formula is very similar. But we also have an idea section in the middle where we explore, like magazines, they can use text and images in ways that, online hasn't really caught up with yet. So we have a section, this idea section, where we kind of tried to make each story its own thing. And loosely it's dealing with emerging representational paradigms, so things like computer vision or CCTV or whatever. So these are this is a feature on projection mapping, again, playing with layout a lot. These are illustrations by Normals. I mentioned Cedric earlier, but these are speculative features, essentially perspective substitute realities from the 2033. It would be hard to have this really work on the web. This as well, these are annotated drawings of emerging display technologies. This really great artist named Paul Prudence kind of wrote up things like holograph machines, because there are actually ones out there. The Pepper's Ghost trick that was used to resurrect Tupac, etc. So it's him writing these up and explaining them to a general audience. Him, this kind of ace artist, interpreting the work and making people understand how it works. And then we brought in an illustrator to draw it and show how these systems operate. So again, you could do this on the web, but it really works much better in print. And then magazines, of course, engender all these other opportunities. We have a feature on Dam Gallery, which is kind of the most prominent and oldest digital art gallery in Berlin. Within the article, in the middle of it, you open it up and there's a little publication within the publication that's a retrospective of the 10 years of the gallery. So it's almost like a hyperlink of another article. So again, really, really playing with the medium and thinking about what we can do with print. And then capitalizing on the fact that our audience that is mostly web savvy, they haven't experienced magazines like this before, probably. Lots of these independent publications I was talking about are playing with all these tricks, but we're the lucky guys or the lucky people to get to debut them for this community that hasn't really seen them before. This is another little extra we had with the publication. It was like a choose-your-own-adventure RPG illustration by Normals that was basically accompanied with the magazine. So it's not that we're just shipping you the magazine you get, but we can commission an artist with some of our funds to make something cool and stick it in as well. So, capitalizing every opportunity to kind of commission work and share cool stuff with our readers. And this is actually a shot of us at DAM. This is our first stockist in Berlin. right beside Vera Molnar, who's like a 90-year-old kind of key, probably the first female digital artist. She does these drawings with plotting machines. I've been doing them forever. I don't really have much time to speak to this, but this is the cover of the magazine. And what we did was kind of come up, we worked with the studio, rather than do ads. This is still kind of, the jury's out on if this is going to work, but we're trying to get arts organizations and companies to support us like you would support an arts organization. And then we hire a designer to kind of do something cool. So rather than having an ad that nobody looks at, every partner has a special page that's designed using this generative technique, which I don't have time to touch on, but it's actually explained in this if you check out the slides later. So, really thinking through everything we do. Like, when we started the magazine, it would be easy to, somebody that makes a keyboard, Moog, or Roland, oh, we want an ad, okay, and they send us the same dumb artwork that they put in every other publication, and then they make in a web banner. So instead of accepting that and just taking the money, we're like, well, no, let's change the rules. Like, we're controlling every little bit of the specifically. Essentially it speaks to like take advantage of every opportunity.
Greg,
yeah.
Can you were doing so awesome, and we just had this big sound of disappointment. Can you go back to every little bit? Because then we lost you for 10 seconds.
Sure. Yeah. This is actually good. I'm just finishing on time. Well, I mean, I can touch on it. So we worked with a studio called Moniker. They're worth looking up.
Oh no. And you can touch on this if you want. You just cut out for after you said every little bit, and for 20 seconds
sure.
We lost you. Don't worry about time. You got lots of time.
Yeah. That's right. Okay. Well, backtrack just a bit. So, like I said, we wanted to take control of every little bit of our production. So things like, even question what an ad is. Rather than just doing them, we decided to make up the rules, and hopefully people will buy into that. And I guess I will explain the cover system. So there's a studio in Amsterdam called Moniker. I really encourage you to look up their work because it's fascinating and beautiful and weird, everything great, designy and accessible. And essentially what we did for this kind of the cover scheme that you see here and on our partner pages, which is basically our advertisers, was we made a script to analyze the contents of the magazine. So for the cover, it was we looked up every instance of HOLO, every instance of each of those letters, and mapped where they were occurring. Made a processing sketch to analyze and basically show the distribution. So the cover is basically a mapping of where HOLO appears within the magazine, just like our partner pages are maps of where the letters that spell out the names of our partners are. So again, taking every opportunity to kind of design every little detail. So far, people are excited about it. We might get, I don't know if we'll get awards or get some recognition for this. I don't know if people will line up to pay for this or not yet. Well, the jury's out on that, but we'll see. But, leave nothing to chance and kind of author every little bit. That's essentially the takeaway from kind of showing this. And then finally, and this is a neat kind of place to wrap up. I opened this talk showing Can and like talking about the immediacy of the web. One of the other things we did, another little detail, was this fold-out. At the end of the magazine, you kind of encounter this. And essentially what it is a timeline of all these technological or cultural developments relative to related or relevant to our audience that happened while we were working on the magazine. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like a news ticker that's embracing the fact that, all this change is flying by, almost operating just like that Twitter feed, except it's curated. We've kind of picked the stories that are most interesting to our population and readers, and documented, neat projects, scientific breakthroughs, etc. And then we also use this as another opportunity to kind of explore generative design. We worked with these designers of this scripting language called Bazel.js. Again, there's a link in the PDF. It's an InDesign plugin. And what it did, we made a script that we pulled all the images from Can, which is the blog, that were published during 6 months, and then batch dumped them into this grid. And we used that as kind of the backdrop for this this kind of report on all these important projects. So there's this kind of connection between what's going on the web. It was also programmed by Philip, who runs the website. And this kind of tongue-in-cheek exploration of kind of web-like logics with print artifacts, totally capitalizing again on what you can do with print. So, these are just some little details. There's just tons of stories, but I just wanted to kind of point at some of the things we tweaked and played with, and things we had fun with, and things that hopefully readers will enjoy and find unique when they hold HOLO for the first time. So just to wrap up, kind of this is where we're at now. The magazine's out. We're selling it. Now that we've got a formula, because we put all this energy into doing the first thing. It's like being a band. There's this quote: "You have your whole life to record your first album, and then you have 6 months to do your second." That's the space we're in now with our magazine. We've got the formula. How do we tweak it? How do we make it better? What worked? What didn't work? We have to look in the mirror. Very much like an iterative art practice. Again, you guys, the money stuff is probably boring, but it's expensive. It costs about the price of an okay car to print 5,000 magazines of the quality that we're dealing with. So how can we get the most, in the same way that if you're buying a car, you want to get the most value for your buck, we can do that with our printing and our production. And we but we don't want to give up these neat extras as well. But some of them are very expensive and some of them are more affordable. So how do we choose the right ones? How can distribution affect our production? But things like our magazine weighed if it weighed 100 and something grams less, we could have shipped it for way cheaper. It's banal, but it affects the bottom line. And then finally, to come full circle, what kind of mediated experiences are good for the soul? So how can we make things that people enjoy touching and spending time with? And essentially, just like the Kickstarter video, stepping away, unconnecting from the web, and just enjoying this immaculate print artifact, and operating at the speed it operates at for a change. Because that's the thing. Print is like a vacation now compared to kind of the noise of the web and the 36 tabs open space. We all do that, so we need to kind of disconnect from that occasionally. So, I talked about this talk. I called it disconnecting from the spin cycle. Well, we're really not out of it. We're really in the middle of it still. We can't escape it. Print production has its own churn. But what we're trying to really do, just like this diagram, is understand the way that things work, and maybe tune and refine the process to our advantage rather than just be thrown around in a maelstrom of how everybody else does things. And those rules apply to any practice. So my takeaways, the knowledge I would impart from my last couple of years working on these projects, and these might or might not be of interest to you. Distinctions between old and new media are meaningless, or at least very problematic. Print is dead. What does that mean? There's services where you can print your Instagram pictures and have them mailed to you, right? So print's not dead. Print's different. And really, what it means that's neat about 2014 is print is a choice now, rather than the default, which is what it would have been, in 1985. Communities yearn for and need a variety of documentary media to provoke conversation and preserve memories. There are 2 other print magazines in and around our kind of digital art. One of them is very academic, and one of them is a little more zine-y. It's great, but it's a little more on the punk rock side in terms of production. So we're really lucky to kind of get to show up for a community that essentially has never seen a more immaculate periodical for it. And the takeaway there is if you do projects that speak to people's interests, you can go farther. I never really put inspirational quotes and stuff in talks, but really the one thing I've learned in working on this project is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This project, working with my creative director, our project manager, and then Philip, who's kind of the Uber blogger, none of us could do this project in isolation, or even half of the team. We're really all trusting people to be experts at what they're experts at and making up the rules as we go. In just kind of working on this magazine for 2 years, just kind of sharing it, we've accomplished more than we have in years of kind of our independent practices. So there's really, I guess the takeaway there is just that teamwork is really underrated, and I highly recommend it. So thanks, that's my quick talk. You can check out and/or order HOLO at that URL, creativeapplications.net/HOLO. Or alternatively, just dial into the blog. We're always publishing stuff, and the more readers, the better. So I know that was a whirlwind talk, and I can't believe I actually reined it in at approximately 45 minutes, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. I didn't talk about Kickstarter that much. I figured there might be some about that, but any questions? I think I can unshare this and go back to being ahead.
Before we have some questions, Greg, just can we have a rousing round of applause for Greg? That's amazing.
I think I'm back to being ahead now.
I got to take a picture of how big you are for your sake. The other, and I want to just jump in with a few thoughts. One is how incredible. I mean, Greg, that was an incredible talk. It really was. So the whirlwind was so perfect for what we're here to talk about. And just for those of you, again, I keep coming back to some of you are not in Art 11, but what we just got was another speaker where we had an entire review of the long and complicated trajectory of media exploration. We saw. So who did we see? We saw Doug Engelbart in there buried. We saw some Zamoon buried. We didn't even talk about those two things. They're in the magazine. What else did we see? I mean, there were so many. We literally saw the whole course in your first issue. But what we're talking about now that's equally interesting, because Arts 12 is about what is the current direction of digital media. That's the title of the class. And what Greg's proposing, and in fact one of those current directions, is that the digital media and print media are not so different, and that this is one of the directions that digital media needs to take. So I think you should be honored to have seen somebody speaking about it. So this could be something that you will look back on 10 years from now. And I saw the first issue of HOLO, and I'll bring it to class. It'll arrive, I assume, within a couple of weeks at my office. So I'll bring it and I'll show you guys the actual print copy in a couple of weeks' time. And lastly, I know you guys probably aren't in the habit of buying fancy monographs, but maybe this is a good place to start, because if you think about the price of that monograph, it's not actually that expensive, because they're probably losing money on the individual copies of that, and you should pick one up, and I'll put the PDF up on the site. So I want to have our group. I know there's some questions from our question asking team, so guys, take it away as you see fit, and I'll turn the screen towards whoever's asking the question.
Oh wow. Yeah. Now you have either place. Okay.
I have a question. I'm going to be looking at one of you. So you covered pretty well the idea of what you're doing to make sure that your magazine doesn't become obsolete in this technological time, but do you have any fears that may eventually be like what happens?
Well, yeah. I mean, I can answer that in a few ways. And at first, I have grown reticent to use the word obsolete more in recent years. Because, for example, just to point out one of our artists, Raquel Myers, does amazing animations with like Commodore 64s and old computers. And there's this whole kind of retro computing scene right now. Actually, Carnegie Mellon, just today, the Studio for Creative Inquiry there, just found a bunch of old Andy Warhol digital paintings from Amigas that were produced in the 80s. So, I mean, obsolete, I don't know if obsolete is a thing. Landfill is a thing. And I would like to think that we're making a publication that people would keep and would feel special about. I don't know if we'll be doing it forever. We would like to do it for a while. We can't really speak to that. We think we'll document the time that we're around for well. And, we're not sentimental creatures, so we'll follow the project as long as it feels good. We'll get restless at a certain point. But no, I don't think that print is obsolete. If anything, it's weird because these neat print tricks are way cooler than any like tablet interaction now. Like I take this I stare at the magazine so much, it's hard for me to like look at it objectively. So what I do is I go with my friends and I show it to them for the first time, and I just watch what they do. And when they get to the fold out and they pull it out, and like the way that they kind of inspect things, I mean, that's, for me, and again, I'm like as digital of a person as someone can be, right? It's not either or, it's and, I'd say. But I see people connecting with these tactile things much more than like a new cool app gesture or something. It's really weird. Like it's not new, but we've become alienated from print. So suddenly it can have this aura again, because like my generation was disconnected from it, and you guys are like, what's print? I mean, you have paper and stuff, but like, I know that like if you look at like the newspaper, the stats of who's reading a newspaper across generations, it just does this, right? So like I'm in my late 30s. I marginally pay attention, but I never actually get a paper, and maybe I'll buy a New York Times and a Sunday once every 3 months if I'm in a coffee shop. And my parents would subscribe to a paper, and guys your age would not even think to buy one, probably, period. So there's my first response. The other thing that was really funny is when we started this project, speaking of obsolete, everybody wanted to know if we were going to do a tablet app. That was like 1 in 3 people, that's the first thing they would say, oh, will there be a tablet app? And at first we were kind of like, yeah, sure. And then we realized like, oh my God, this has been so much work, we can never do this other thing. But just in the time this project has been around, as far as magazines and news go, when we started this, everybody was like, you need to do a tablet app or your history. And nobody made any money on them, and they all lost a ton of money, and nobody uses them because nobody has got the design right yet. There's a few kind of good ones and good bespoke ones, but essentially it's been a train wreck. Trying to make the magazine work on a tablet. We see neat things on the web, like neat stories, and newspapers are doing cool features and stuff, but digital has not caught up with like what a nice book or what a nice publication can do in certain contexts anyways. So there's my kind of the question about obsolescence is really, it's good, it's just it's really muddy waters. So I would basically, like, one of my takeaway points was just this idea of new media. There's emerging media, there's newer media, but I don't know, new is, there's the quote that says technology is whatever works, whatever doesn't work is technology, right? So I mean, in a certain sense, print was, but now we don't consider it as such because it's so commonplace. Anyways, that was really rambling, so thank you.
All right, thanks. Next question.
I was just wondering, it's interesting that to create this print magazine, you had to go through an online fundraising format. So how important do you think HOLO's online presence will be? Like, how much importance do you guys place on that?
Well, we have this. And the other thing about the tablet question was everybody like, oh, wait, what about the tablet magazine? And we're like, we write 200 blog posts a year, and we post on Twitter 10 times a day. So we don't need to make the magazine online as well because everything else is. Creative Apps is like super active. Like Philip lives and breathes the web. So we kind of get the best of both worlds. The magazine team gets to kind of work in isolation and work quietly and think quietly on the magazine. And then Philip is out there kind of banging the war drum, but also kind of pointing at work and writing up projects like on an hour-to-hour basis. I think he published 2 blog posts today. So it's very important for us. If we didn't have him, if we didn't have his blog with an audience, I don't even know how this project could have happened. So, I mean, I'd say online presence is crucial. And all these magazines, I talked about how great print is again, but so many of these magazines, the only reason they're working is because the magazine has a good enough web presence, and that the fans or the readers or this community of people with a passion, they can find it and they can order it online and give, shipping aside, 90% of the money goes in the pocket of the person that makes the thing versus like a publisher, a distributor, a store, and then like 20% goes back to the person that made it. So it's just like music. So online presence is key. You don't need to be on every social media thing necessarily, but if some of them are working for you, then that's good for you. I met an editor for a magazine called Serial in London in February. She has 100,000 Instagram followers. So, I mean, I don't know how many of those people are buying the magazine, but it's still like advertising, like it's a lifestyle, it's like food and travel. So she, takes pictures of nice food on tables, that stuff. But it's still communicating it sounds crass, but it's still communicating the brand, putting the brand and the idea and the worldview into people's lives in like a little way. So yeah, I mean, I think it'd be really hard to be like in a cave and not online and making a print publication right now.
Last question, very quickly, from the question group. You have one.
What actually inspired you to go into art and media from being in architecture?
I was always interested in it on the side.
Has to be 60 seconds.
Yeah, sure. You have these weird moments when you realize that the thing you're doing in your own time is the thing you're most interested in. And I realized that at a certain point. I enjoyed architecture school, but at the end of the day, I didn't enjoy the commercial practice that much, so I just kind of followed my interests. And that's it, really. I mean, there wasn't a eureka moment. It was just a gradual thing.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you once again.
Thanks, guys.